Is the President of the United States the most powerful and influential person in the world? That's the question you're going to have to answer today, government class. All right, and so it's kind of an interesting argument. And when I say, by the way, I'll try to remember to say this later in the video, but when I say the president, I don't necessarily mean Donald Trump. He's only the president potentially for another few months. But when I say the president, I mean the office of president, right? The position of president. And so you're going to have to wrestle with that opinion question. Is the presidency the most powerful position, or is it the most powerful person in the world? Now, you're going to have to do that, though, based on some very specific guidelines here, right? So let me kind of walk you through, because I want you to have a broad overview of the powers of the president. So we've hinted at a few of them, right? We've hinted at that he's the commander-in-chief. We've hinted that he's the chief executive, right? But in the handout that I provide to you today, I listed out specifically the places and the ways that the president gets his power. Now, some of these are really obvious, right? Like military power, foreign relations power. Okay. So let me just touch on a couple of them that are a little more difficult, and then give you a couple guidelines for the assignment. So, okay. First, the president has a lot of legislative power, mainly because the president may veto, right, may strike down, may end, any potential law. And that is super intimidating to the legislative branch, because if you remember back just a week or two ago, right, we studied how to pass a law, and that's a really time-consuming process. And so Congress might spend, the legislative branch might spend 3, 4, 5 weeks passing a bill, and then it goes to the president, and in 10 seconds, he vetoes it. All right, so there goes all their work. And so even just the threat of a veto is typically enough to stop a bill from passing. All right, and I give you some more details in the handout, like how many, what does it take to have the president's veto overridden, to kind of go over it. How many times does that happen, etc. But the important thing you need to know is when a law passes, that's because the president has signed it, right? Or he's had the chance to veto it at the last minute, right? He's the last say on any potential law. All right, second area that the president gets to have a lot of power in is because he has judicial powers. And these center around two main functions, right? First, the president gets to appoint all of the national level judges. Now, this is not the judge that some of you have gone to pay a ticket to at your local courthouse, right, for speeding. Okay, that's not the kind of judge. We're talking Supreme Court judges. We're talking national level judges, in courts in Detroit or in Marquette, right, or in Cincinnati. Okay, that's the level of judgeship we're talking about. The president gets to appoint them. Now, true, the Senate has to approve those nominations and those appointments. But, the president pretty much gets to name who he wants, okay, within reason. So that's a very powerful job, right? He's getting to appoint the judges in the judicial branch. Second big power in the judicial branch is that the president, for national crimes, things like, say, treason, wiretapping, kidnapping, bank fraud, okay, he can, for those crimes, actually pardon someone, right, legally forgive them, act like it never happened, and he can even grant amnesty, which is pardoning an entire group. Okay, and again, I've given you more details in the handout, right, but I wanted to highlight it that is his judicial powers. Huge power appointing the judges, right, that is massive. So to review, he gets to veto laws, and he gets to appoint judges. Massive, massive powers. All right, third power that I'll mention is his executive power. So the lesson yesterday, you researched one of the 15 departments that the president is in charge of. Remember, he gets to appoint the leader to that department, and he may remove that leader. So, this department largely does what the president wants. And yeah, there's guidelines, right? Remember, they still have to enforce the laws, but these cabinets can kind of determine how strictly the laws are going to be put in place. Okay, so he gets power through those 15 departments. In addition, the executive branch also has a number of what's called independent agencies that the president oversees. Agencies like, say, NASA, the FBI, OSHA, okay? And these are independent. In other words, they serve the entire government, okay? But they're overseen by the president. And for some of them, he gets to choose the leaders of those groups and can remove them. Some of them he can't, okay? Some of them he can only appoint a new leader when that person's term is up, okay? But the point is they report to the executive branch. And so the president, again, has some influence, especially in the regulations that these agencies use, okay? And so when you hear President Trump talking about like, hey, I'm going to roll back the red tape, right? I'm going to cut the bureaucracy. This is what he's referring to. It's his executive power through the 15 cabinet departments and the numerous independent agencies that he gets to use to control and influence people's everyday lives, right? Through the red tape and the regulations and the little minute rules of government that we all have to follow. So the idea now is, right, you have to determine, do these powers, and a couple of the other simpler ones on the handout that you'll want to look at, do these powers then make the president the most powerful person in the world? And, you know, I mean, he does have a lot of power. I mean, let's not downplay it. The executive branch employs millions of people, okay? It's around, I don't know, it's above 10 million people. So that's a lot of power and influence if you're, you know, in charge of that many people. But, you know, I don't want you to assume that he's the most powerful. You know, clearly my handout is also going to detail limits on some of these powers. So he's not a dictator, right? And we've already talked about he's elected every 4 years. He can only serve 2 terms. So in the discussion board assignment, you're going to need to make sure that you are being very, very specific. You must reference, for full credit, you must reference some of the powers and limits that are included in the handout, or that are included about his term, or his pay, or his requirements to be able to serve, right? His age, etc. Okay, you've got to reference those. It's not just, well, yeah, he does a lot, so he's powerful. Nope, get specific. Okay, if you're going to say he is the most powerful, you better be giving maybe specific examples from history, right? That prove the presidency is very powerful. If you're going to say he's not the most powerful, then you sure as shooting better provide an alternative person. It's not enough to just say, nope, he's not the most powerful, and then give no alternative for who is, okay? If you're going to say he's not, then you need to provide somebody who is over top of the president in terms of power. Not necessarily from our country, right? It might be. Maybe it is. All right? But it may be somebody from some other country. So kind of a resource that I provided for you, I included a page that has 2 or 3 websites that provide lists of most powerful people in the world, right? One famous one is put out by Forbes magazine every year. So I attached that link for you. I gave you kind of a cool link where you can look up, I know it's on Wikipedia, but you can look up Forbes list from like the last 10 or 12 years to see how kind of they have changed their rankings as events and things have happened. All right, so you can kind of, you know, look at those resources to get an idea of like, okay, well, who's the president matched up against according to these experts, right? And why might this person, in my opinion, be more powerful than the president? Or, you know, why is the president clearly above these people, in my opinion? Okay. So again, I gave many, many detailed instructions on the discussion board instruction page, but just be aware, be specific. Okay, you're going to have to reference the resources from the last few days about the executive branch to get full credit. All right, have fun with it, right? Be persuasive, and make sure that you prove or disprove, and answer the question: is the president the most powerful person in the world?